Greetings, ladies and metal gents, and welcome to this narration of the web series Solo Apocalypse. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 31. We fell into a rhythm. My clones acted as forward scouts, accompanying both Jack and Rickson as we made our way back to the exit. If we run into trouble, don't hesitate to leave me behind, Ninth told Rickson. You said you feel everything your other selves do. Are you sure? He asked, uncertain. Positive, Eighth replied, having a variation of the same conversation with Jack. There was no need for them to accompany my clones, but both claimed it would help them level. Their lives weren't my responsibility, and so as long as they were aware, I had no right nor reason to stop either of them. Meanwhile, my original self walked ahead, and Sixth, who allowed me a third-person perspective of myself by watching my original self's entire surroundings. Nothing by the way of a regular approach would go unnoticed, including one from my shadow. Ahead of me, Parker, along with some men and women with applicable skills in actual combat, took the vanguard. Nearby, Rose and Gary, Seventh, took the rear guard, further back than even Sixth. Our trip back was actually less eventful than before, although there was a renewed sense of uncertainty and paranoia in the air. We were able to navigate away from most dangers, only taking fights we were completely ready for. I wasn't sure how that affected our gains, but we didn't come away empty-handed. This place gives me the creeps, Jack commented, his quiet voice easily carrying across the silence. The forest was tinged blue, shrouded in just enough shadow to make people see things. Sometimes, things that were actually there. The low light, along with the unfamiliar flora and fauna, made everything uncanny. Normally one moment, alien the next. I'd realized over the course of the week that I was actually seeing better than everyone else. My perception attributed at play, no doubt. It's not welcoming, is it? I said, pausing slightly as I caught a pair of eyes along the tree line. They disappeared as I spotted them, and that was normal. It's like the entire place is watching us. I wasn't sure if anyone else realized how true that rang. Eventually, we came to a stop. It was hard to gauge the day and night cycle here. Gary took the lead of those matters, either having an impressive internal clock or somehow understanding the fatigue of the group as a whole. I was leaning towards the latter, almost certain he'd employed some kind of skill during the encounter with the nightmare Ifrits. I found myself with relative privacy for the first time in a while. I shrugged off my spider silk backpack, rolling my shoulders. I reached inside and came away with a small container that had been dominating my thoughts recently. I held up the small glass jar against the moonlight. The blue liquid moved on occasion, minutely, almost as if it were nervous, or perhaps weakened, dormant, yet unmistakably alive. Item: Regenerator's Symbiote. An organism that blinds to a single host. Once bound, this symbiote improves all biological functions, increases vitality, and enhances recovery effects upon the host. Constitution increased by 10. Natural regeneration and recovery effects increased by 80%. I shuddered, staring at it, but I couldn't disregard its effects. Seeing as the thing came from an epic boss chest, I couldn't even estimate its worth. That epic modifier, that purple glow I'd witnessed, was in a realm of its own. Not to mention, it came from a boss chest, which likely connotated greater rewards in and of itself. With both combined, every single thing received from my encounter with the Root Mother Hive Mind was a precious treasure. Aside from the Ring of the Hive Mind, Third had been testing the living armor to great effect. It turned away the mundane blades of goblins and was semi-reactive to his thoughts. Sturdy beyond reason, breathable, adaptable. It was hard to find any downsides to it. The symbiote was more, invasive than any of the others, not something just to put on. It was undoubtedly powerful if I were taking the system at face value, though I couldn't be certain there were no consequences of letting something bond with me on a biological level. Essentially, letting an alien lifeform tie itself to me, in whatever form that took. What consequences beyond the extra stats would that entail? The nightmare Ifrits, along with the uneasy danger I was constantly feeling, had forced the issue. I was acutely aware of any injury. 3 of my selves were currently wounded. 7th had been bitten across the shoulder by a mouth as large as his head. 9th had a more superficial gash across his chest, and 8th had been stabbed in the arm. If my original body suffered those injuries, I was keeping it together. The problem was, I felt everything. It did wonders for my mood. I suspected that was the reason will factored into the never alone skill, because it was needed to withstand and negate sensory overload. I popped the cork, watching the symbiote react. It bubbled as I brought it to eye level, roused. It wiggled and sloshed, moving to one side of the bottle as if fearful, inching forward as if curious. That blatant display of even slight intelligence gave me immediate pause. "Evan!" I nearly jumped to my feet. I somehow missed his approach and jerked slightly, covering the jar. Jack caught my surprise. Sorry," he said sheepishly. "It's a new skill, silent approach. Came with the levels," he explained. Though it was less his sound and more the dark woven cloak covering his figure that allowed my surprise. Most of my clones were looking outward, and one looking inward had been focused on the edge of the camp. "Sorry," I breathed, relaxing my posture. My free hand had instinctively gone for my knife, a sad reflection of my reality. "Did you need something?" Nothing, just to talk, if you don't mind," he said, holding 2 skewers of meat. Dinner, using the processed meats from the day's hunt skill. I smiled, grabbed the offered skewer, and gestured nearby. "Be my guest." Jack took a seat beside me. "You are sure you're staying?" he asked. "This place is maddening." "Already made up my mind," I shrugged, biting off a morsel of sweet and savory meat. "I think the best thing for anyone right now was to become strong enough to survive. The dungeon might be a blessing in that regard, something for us to throw ourselves against." Memories of horrors and bodies came unbidden, a ruin and destruction. All the helpless people, mindless thralls walking around the clearing, walking to their deaths. "You know the majority are leaving, right?" Jack asked, glancing at the mingling people. "And the more people that go means fewer people are left. It gets more dangerous. I might have dealt with worse, to be honest," I said softly. "Somehow, I don't doubt that." Jack looked at me oddly. "How old are you?" 23. Jesus. "You're 3 years younger than me," he chuckled, leaning back, looking towards my small fire. "World's gone to hell, man. It truly fecking has." You're just realizing that. A genuine laugh at the sheer accuracy of the statement escaped me before I settled down as it sunk in. No kidding. We spoke about nothing for quite some time. It was a conversation with no meaning, no context or substance, but it simply was. And for that, it was something more. I found myself unwinding, letting down my mental burdens, if only for a single conversation. In the end, he took his leave after a better part of an hour, having to take his turn on the rotating watch. I felt confident watching with just my clones, but extra eyes weren't unwelcome. Once I was alone again, I pulled out the jar, my hand covering it. And the symbiote wasn't there anymore. Slightly panicked, I checked my status as Rickson had been referring to it. That strange culmination of my person. My eyes started to contribute. Name, Evan Winst, level 23. Title, Trailblazing Vanquisher of the Hive Mind. Traits, Regenerator. Class, Solo. Strength 16, Constitution 27, Dexterity 15, Agility 16, Perception 19, Intelligence 20 plus 5, Wisdom 27 plus 5, Willpower 29 plus 5, Charisma 14 plus 5. Luck 14, Stat Points 18, Skills, Never Alone, Low Profile, Solo's Instinct, Solo Sanctuary, and Telepathy. I immediately found the value had risen from 17. Heart speeding up, then I saw something else entirely, mental gaze drawn to a new section of the status. Traits. And I was immediately flooded with what they entailed. A trait defined an exceptional quality or characteristic, generally one which was inherent to an individual. In my case, I took a breath, resigned to accept the conclusion I'd come to after seeing the empty jar, perfectly sealed off with my hand and with no symbiote within. I wanted to slap myself, realized I could, and then instead took a breather with a mental image. Trait, Regenerator. You are, in some way or another, exceptionally suited to recovering from injury. A mutualistic symbiont lives within you, improving your constitution and enriching biological functions. The symbiont enhances natural recovery and coordination external healing factors. Constitution increased by 10, natural regeneration and recovery effects increased by 80%. It had the exact effects of the item, only it was now an intrinsic part of me. I stared at my hands, my arms, waiting waiting for some waves of nausea or wrongness to hit me, some feeling under my skin, in my flesh. I focused my perception inwards, leveraging every sense I had to focus on my internal understanding of my body. And I felt better than I ever felt, alive, back then, when I had become the trailblazing vanquisher of the hive mind. The influx of stats was mind-boggling. I'd barely had time to trace them all, and with each one increased similarly, it was as just as become suddenly more. Now, I felt my body as biology intended. I remember reading somewhere that very few people could claim they knew what health felt like. I understood that now. There was living as one did, and then there was this. It was like my body was brimming with energy, inexplicably restored. I opened and closed my hands, amazed. It was funny how weak I could feel, how vulnerable, with so many instances of myself running around, that had just always just been 9 more me's. As odd as it sounded, they didn't make me feel any more capable and strength of my person. This was different than any of my skills. It was me, plain and simple. And slowly exploring my raw capabilities, it was reassuring to see tangible growth, to not just see these numbers, but be certain in their application. In this apocalypse, I was sure that it was something precious. End of chapter. I just quickly want to thank my Tier 5 channel members and patrons. Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Barky, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Lord Azrakal, Oakfield, and Dragzoon WRE. Thank you very much.